Jamie, welcome.
It's nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being with us. So you knew from an early age that you were gonna give back in some way.
Well, it's funny. When I was growing up, my parents were teachers and social workers. I wanted to be fabulously rich, and I was going to become a surgeon. I watched every episode of MASH. I wanted to be like Hawkeye Pierce. I went to Creighton University and to study pre-med, and I ended at the 11th hour deciding that maybe that wasn't what I wanted to do. And I tell my students now that by not becoming a surgeon, I saved lives.
Well, it also is a great lesson for parents. If you should let your children watch television because then they'll aspire to great careers.
Yeah, that's the message of tonight.
Yeah. So I imagine that New Orleans must have been a really interesting place for you to start tossing around these different ingredients, thinking about how you were going to use your passion and your skills and your interests on behalf of a community.
Yeah, absolutely. I was in a community where it was the first time that I saw the impacts of inequity. I was a child of privilege. I had parents who took care of me and made sure I had everything I needed. And I was in a community where if I'd switched roles with some of the kids who were there, they would have been more than happy to go on and do the things that I was doing, and I would have been dealing with some of the hardships that come with poverty. And so I learned a lot there, and decided that for me, my mission or my work wanted to be about how do you level the playing field and how do you give back and really contribute to community.
Was New Orleans a place where also the music snuck in and you thought, man, this is a way to connect people?
Yeah, New Orleans was so much cooler than I was. And so, I mean, it's the greatest eating town, it's the greatest music town. And so at the same time, you're in this community that has all these wonderful cultural values, and at the same time, it's dealing with an enormous amount of poverty.
Yeah. So if we were to fast forward years later, you're in Uganda. Maybe you can just sort of describe the scene and what you discovered when you first went there.
So I show up in Uganda, and I'm there to kind of figure out what's going on, and I'm in the slums in Kampala, and I go up in the north, and I see where the child soldiers are being rehabilitated, and fall madly in love with this community. I've been doing a lot of poverty work in the United States, and I remember the woman who I was kind of being hosted by. She's running a grassroots organization there, and I remember turning to Shane. I was like, I'm going to come back and I'm going to help. And she looked at me and she said, please don't do anything. She said that the East Africa community is inundated with nonprofits that show up and build schools and ship laptops without actually really ever getting to know who the communities are and what they're about. And she said, before you actually come and fix something, listen and think.
Wow. So it's sort of that's a refreshing and counterintuitive message, right?
It was a very pivotal message for me in terms of how you do your community development work and how do you engage with communities where we don't. There's this message in the Western culture that we inculcate in our students, and our young people. We say, hey, don't just stand there, do something. And when I got to Africa, Africa said, hey, don't just do something, but stand there. And listen to the community and listen to what they're saying before you try to fix something.
Wild, and sage, because you think about all the aid dollars that get either siphoned off or mishandled in one way or another. The support can easily go awry.
Yeah, and I think it's just important for us to, the mission of the Global Livingston Institute evolved into listen, think, and act. And those first two parts are really important before you move to the action phase.
So what did you do? You sat around, you watched, you listened, you cogitated.
Yeah, I did all of those things. I had a great time. I fell madly in love with Uganda and Rwanda. And we ended up building a research institute. And started engaging scholars from around the United States. And we built 18 academic partnerships. And we engaged about 40 full-time Ugandans to help us start building community and listening and thinking together. And we started figuring out what it meant for us to train Ugandans and put them back into the workplace. And we started learning from them as we built Intusi, which is our research center, where we employ 18 full-time Ugandans and have figured out that if you actually create jobs for people and you create an opportunity for them to earn income for their own families, that's the game changer.
Yeah.
And we're having the time of our lives.
Did you have a focus? Was it like agriculture or economics or healthcare or education or what were you focused on mostly?
Yeah, our focus was really on two things. One was education. How do we change the way that young people in the United States are thinking about Africa? And how do we change those stereotypes and those ideas of what we go and we find out when we get to Africa? And then the second part of it is, well, how do we put people back to work in Africa? How do you create jobs? That if you create meaningful jobs and you provide workforce development training and you put people back to work, they don't need you to build them a school. They don't need you to build them a health center. They can figure those things out on their own.
Right.
People want to be empowered to be able to make their own decisions, and how do you create that space for them to do that?
That's cool. And when did the wild idea of putting on music festivals dovetail into this ambitious effort?
So this crazy student comes over. He's a musician, and he said, we're on this beautiful lake in southern Uganda, and we're hanging out one day, and he's like, you should do a music fest here. And I have no musical inclinations whatsoever. And I said, you should do a music fest here. And so about a week later, a guy from Tulane calls me, a man by the name of Andrew Ward, and he's crazy, and he wears a white suit, and he plays banjo, and he said, I will do your music festival. And Andrew did do our music festival. He got the Flowbots to come over. He got some musicians from New Orleans, from Nashville to come over, and we jammed with musicians in East Africa and in Uganda, and we brought people together. And some amazing things started to happen when you actually start bringing community together. And some amazing things can happen in the community development work that you do when you bring arts and culture and music together.
Yeah, that's the secret sauce. And when you had your first festival, when these bands came over, where do they gather? Was it a field or a soccer field, or what happened?
This is the great thing. So we go over there, and we're going to have this music festival, and the public health workers came and said, hey, as long as you're going to bring all these folks together and you're going to have a free concert, would it be okay if we actually provided some HIV testing and some public health services and some reproductive health services? And we said, absolutely. So they showed up, and I was like, who's going to test for HIV at a concert? Why would you possibly do that? And it's a free concert. People can come. So the first night, I wasn't even sure that we'd have 4,000 people show up for the concert, and I was right. We didn't have 4,000 people show up for this concert. We had 5,000 people show up for the concert.
Wow.
And in the first hour, we ran out of HIV tests. We tested more people for HIV that day in 1 hour than they tested in the entire year that year. We tested 847 people for HIV. And the reason it worked was because the community drove it. It wasn't my idea. It wasn't somebody from the United States coming and saying we should do this. It was a community saying, hey, if we could use music as a platform, we could actually reach this community in ways that we've never been able to before.
Wild. So wild. And you said something interesting. You said, I wasn't sure we were going to get 4,000 people. I would have thought, I'm not sure we're going to get 400 people. So you just had a sense this was going to take off, and you had a big space where 4,000 people could come together?
Yeah, so we rented out the soccer arena, and folks came and they showed up, and what was really interesting is we created a space for 4,000 people the first year. This past year, we had 22,000 people come to that show, and so it's a very cool thing. Yeah, we should, not me, but Uganda, that's a cool thing.
Yeah. And so I assume they stocked up on AIDS kits for the bigger crowds.
Yeah, something really amazing is happening when you turn a community loose and you let them actually make the decisions. 5 years later, as I'm sitting here on stage, which I'm so proud of, is I'm a small part of a community that over the last 5 years, these music festivals have connected 170,000 people with concerts, and over 26,000 people have tested for HIV, and over 1,000 women have been screened for cervical cancer. And so we're connecting people with basic healthcare services, but at the same time, we're doing it in a really human way. Mm-hmm. That these people who are showing up have never been invited to be part of a concert in their entire lives. They've never been able to come to an eTown show. They've never been able to be part of something. When you create a seat at the table, in the same way that you guys do with eTown, some really amazing things happen.
Yeah, that's cool, Jamie. I want to ask you just a practical thing. So here I am. I'm a person who goes to this concert. I take an AIDS screening test, and it comes back positive. What happens?
So I think that's where the value of really connecting with the local community is that 100% of the people who have tested positive for HIV, 100% of the people who are screened positive for cervical cancer are immediately connected with the service providers who actually live and work there, so that those people are actually getting access to those services immediately and are not waiting to see if we're going to show up again or if we're going to come back again, that we have a sustainable, really thoughtful approach to the way that we're doing community development, and we're really proud of that.
Yeah, that's so amazing. And these are people who wouldn't otherwise even, they walk to come to this event for the most part, and
yeah, they walk, and it's really interesting. I've been working in nonprofit communities for years, and I'm really cheap when it comes to how we spend our money. And our staff the first year had bought 4,000 tickets to hand out for a free concert. And I was like, why in the hell would you buy concert tickets for? It's a free concert. When 4,000 people show up, tell people to stop coming. And you don't get it. They say, go into town and hand out the tickets. So I go into town, I hand out the tickets, and people put those tickets in their jacket pockets, and they put them in their their purses and their bags. I guarantee you, 5 years later, if you went back, you could find those tickets in their huts and in their homes and in their cars. These are people who've never been invited to be part of anything. Wow. So the first night of that concert, 4,000 people showed up that had never been invited to be part of a concert in their entire lives, or anything for that matter. And so how do we create a seat at the table for people who don't have a seat at the table, who don't get invited to things? And then your community development work becomes a lot more human and becomes a lot more interesting.
Yeah. And so there's ongoing work now between the festivals and between the concerts through the Global Livingston Institute. Is that what you said?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked. We're going into our next year. Michael Franti's coming over in March. We're always looking for new cultural ambassadors and music aficionados to join us in Uganda and Rwanda. I guarantee you it's a music experience like you've never had before. And we're excited about getting people to start talking about how do we change the way that people are doing their community development work. And that we need to provide HIV testing, we need to provide education, we need to provide healthcare, but there's a cool way that we could be doing that we could do it under the auspices of an awesome concert. We could do that in human ways that we all want to come to a good concert tonight and hear really good music. So do people who live in Africa. Yeah. And so we've got to change the way that we're thinking about our communities, and we've got to change the way that we're thinking about Africa.
Yeah, and let them inform the conversation and actually execute. It's just, you're listening, you're following the advice that you got when you first went there.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah. It sounds great, Jamie. You're doing a great job, and congratulations on your success. I want to just check the website. Is it Global Livingston?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. It's the Global Livingston, www.globallivingston.org. And please check us out, and any ways that we can connect you or community to what we're doing in East Africa, we're excited about it. So
there's photos and videos and the schedule for your upcoming concerts and all that stuff.
Great video clips. Great. Follow us on Facebook or Twitter, and we're just honored to be here tonight. We think what eTown is doing is amazing, and we're excited to be a small part of that.
Jamie, thanks so much, and congratulations. This week's winner of the eChievement Award, Jamie Van Leeuwen.
Thank you.
Founder of the Global Livingston Institute, doing great work in Africa, building community through music, healthcare, education. Congratulations, Jamie. Hi, this is Nick Forster from eTown. If you want to stay up to date with all the performances, interviews, and behind-the-scenes footage, click the subscribe button. Thanks.